Speaker. When you really believe in some stuff so much that you put your hand up and your head above the parapet and try and get into this House, one of the biggest frustrations is to have to work with compromise. Compromise that is affected by who is putting up some legislation and whether or not they're in your party or not, whether they're supporting your party or not, and the arguments begin. And a number of people come to this House and they take on these issues as if they're fighting in the front row of the All Blacks. And as someone who never had the privilege of playing for the All Blacks but spent about 25 years in the front row, I don't believe that that is the attitude in which you should come to this House. And it's not the attitude in which this public, our public, the people who put us here, want to debate these issues within the House either. And it's a privilege then to be the chair of the Justice and Electoral Committee, with the members of the integrity of those who have been spoken of this afternoon, the Honourable David Parker, Jacinda Ardern, Lynn Pillay, Dr Kennedy Graham, Simon Bridges, Kanwal Bakshi, Hekia Parata and Paul Quinn, and to be able to work together in a very collaborative way. And I thank the various members of the committee for their kind words this afternoon in respect not only of the committee and the way that it works, but of my chairmanship of it. And it is very much a privilege to be able to work on this sort of legislation that with a reasonable amount of collaboration and an expectation of fair play and a willingness to engage will have an enduring nature to it, because it will work past those political divides. And this particular bill, indeed an oxymoron, as my friend Te Urua Flavel has mentioned it, remote participation, does a number of things which a lot of people outside the system would be very, very pleased with. Firstly, remote participation allows for cheaper court cases. But I believe very strongly that justice should never really be measured on how much it costs, because justice is something that, as the Scripture tells us, rains down upon all the earth, the just and the unjust. Living in a civilised society, justice is meted out to those who deserve it and those who don't. And that is why we know that we live in a just country, and that is why I'm so pleased to be living in this country and not living in Cuba or Fiji or Georgia or some other country where justice is really based on who can pay for it as to who it's going to be extended to or who you know, rather than the fact that you are a defendant and he who asserts must prove and innocent until proven guilty. The fact that people will be able to appear before the court via AVL as witnesses is a good thing, and it has significant advantages, but it also has some disadvantages. The fact that we deal with media in the way that Te Urua Flavel outlined to us earlier is exactly the point. And as somebody who, for instance, has been the officer in charge of trials, for instance, of sexual abuse involving young children, having a young child appear before the court and give her evidence by audio-visual link has some definite advantages, because it encourages that child, for instance, to get the words out. It has a distinct disadvantage, and that is this. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in, we're used to seeing horrible things on television. And so when a child witness is giving evidence of the terrible things that happened to her, the most disgusting sexual crimes, for instance, it's all too easy for a jury to be removed from it, to be remote from the full effect of that evidence, because they're watching it on a television monitor, and unfortunately we're used to seeing bad things on television. So I would encourage people to, where they can, actually be in the room, because the weight of the evidence carries far more effect if the witness is in the room. It has huge advantages as far as safety for those required to transport prisoners to and from court, and we've heard about and recalled to mind, for instance, the death of Liam Ashley. So where the default position is that for procedural matters people appear via AVL to save the threat to the safety of those officers and fellow prisoners, then that is a good thing, and we can agree with that. But it was real concern for a number of us that this bill sought to remove and to trip away a fundamental right to be present at one's own trial. And what bothers me is that over recent years there has been huge traction gains by a section in this society who lives remote from the judicial system, has no contact with it, who wants to get harder and harder and harder on those who appear before the court. And I was pleased to hear my friend from the ACT Party, David Garrett, finally admit that the rights of the defendant are paramount within our justice system, and so they should be. It bothers me, for instance, that a recent media study showed that of 100% of police stories that were in our newspapers, 80% of them were neutral. They only reported the fact that the police were involved in a particular case and were neither bad news nor good news. 10% were negative and 10% were positive for the police. But call to mind any of those neutral newspaper articles or any of the positive newspaper articles is a very, very difficult thing to do. Yet we can recall to mind quite easily the abhorrent cases that are reported in respect of our law and order issues. And all that does is to gain traction for those people who want to attrit away the rule of law as it applies to people who appear before the court. And I am incredibly proud to be part of this government and to work under the leadership of the Minister of Justice, the Honourable Simon Power, who is prepared to have a listen to a debate, to consider the arguments, to change his position with the prospect of some degree of attack from another side or from commentators out there that I've already referred to do what is right in a situation, to do what is just in a situation and protect the rule of law. Thank you.
Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much,